Well, the time is just gone 13 minutes to 9 as we continue this morning with news and views right here on Tela Media. And the question is just how complicated is South Africa's visa regime, particularly in terms of the processes that need to be followed when applying for visas to South Africa. And here we're talking about Nigeria in particular. And we heard about the announcement made by President Cyril Ramaphosa announcing a simplified visa process for Nigerian visitors to South Africa. Now, to unpack and to understand what this actually means, we're joined by Professor David Monyae, the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Professor David Monyae, good morning to you, sir. As always, welcome, and your presence much appreciated this morning right here on Salam Media.
Good morning and good morning to your listeners.
Yes, there have always been question marks with regard to visa regimes and how countries actually approach the visa issue, particularly with regard to processes and being on the African continent, South Africa, and looking at our relationship with other African countries and more importantly, the process. And we're talking Nigeria today in particular, where we've heard the announcement from the president talking about simplifying this process. Just your thoughts, Professor David?
I think our starting point should be just try to put it in much more a larger context. Our relationship with Nigeria is one of those most important on the African continent, given the history of the two countries. That goes far beyond the now. Throughout the liberation struggle, Nigeria played a critical role across the continent and internationally, mobilizing forces against the apartheid. Since 1994, I think it is the relationship started on a very bad turn with the dictatorship of Abacha in Nigeria. And you all know the whole full story of Sarawiya, the hanging, and President Mandela going all out to isolate Nigeria. But throughout President Mbeki's presidents, the relationship was consolidated, and both President Obasanjo and President Mbeki promoted the African Renaissance, consolidating and transforming institutions, African institutions, and really putting Africa on the global map. And the two countries united the continent in dealing with peacekeeping on issues of development and so many other areas. However, behind the scene, there's always been this simmering tension around treatment of Nigerians as well as both South Africans in Nigeria. Or at the business front, I think we follow the MTN crisis, as there's always been also issues of whether refugees and treatment of Nigerian in our country. I think this binational meeting in which President Ramaphosa, I think the point which the Department of International Relations and Cooperation has explained, he simply meant simplification of visa process, not just targeting Nigeria, but all over the world. South Africa's Home Affairs is undergoing a process of digitalization, and with all other countries, it's a simplified way of entering your paperwork, as we do with other countries, and moving away from the old system of handing over your passport. I think that's what he meant. But anyway, Home Affairs people will be able to explain that much better than I can.
Yes. Now, obviously, there are a number of issues that we want to obviously look about, and I think the key issue here is the integrity of the visa system that must not be compromised, because there are a number of issues. Because looking at South Africa, our relationship with Nigeria in terms of economic ties, economic activities, at the same time, tourism is another factor as well. And again, looking at South Africa without compromising even our national security, just looking at this simplified process or a more streamlined process, for want of a better term. How is this actually going to impact? Because we know, as you mentioned, South Africa, a powerhouse in the south, Nigeria, a powerhouse in the north as well. And these two countries obviously depend on each other, particularly from an economic perspective. I think that is paramount, Professor David.
Oh, indeed. I think perhaps stating issues of fraudulent around visa processing, it's not just a question of Nigeria. I think it's an internal Home Affairs has a huge, serious issue with a number of officers being arrested. And it's a crisis that South Africa is really trying to resolve. I think great work is being done as we speak, easing up the process, making sure that it is tight and the right people are the ones who apply and are able to move freely. There's that perception of Nigeria that many people hold, but I think we need to dispel that and say the issue is to tighten our system and ensure that we treat each other as Africans with respect, as well as to take advantage of the endless opportunities in Nigeria for South African companies, as well as in South Africa for Nigerian companies that can invest. And we cannot rely on the international community and trade more with overseas countries while we are not taking advantage of our own continent. So I think it's quite important. There are issues in so many ways around crime and the like that involves both Nigerians and South Africans. But perhaps these issues should be really managed by these departments in government and ensure that there's integrity in the system itself and people who manage it, the border control, and ensure that the integrity that you referred to is injected back into the system where there is trust for South Africans entering Nigeria, as well as integrity for a Nigerian entering South Africa
Yes, Professor
on a
David.
day-to-day basis.
And also, I think, when one looks at other countries around the world, when one looks at, for example, the European Union and the relationship that the European countries enjoy with each other in terms of the visa regime, in terms of travel between those countries, and how the European Union actually operates, nothing stops us on the African continent from obviously emulating or even improving on the visa regime between us and other African countries, or just the countries on the African continent in general.
Oh, indeed. I think the major crisis we face is what we call the uneven development on the African continent. As much as we talk of African Renaissance, we talk about integration, Pan-Africanism, the mere fact that South Africa is the most industrialized, there has been a challenge where you complete open borders, bulk of people who rightly come to South Africa for political reasons in their own countries or economic reasons, as well as genuine movement, the numbers become uneasy where you have more coming to South Africa, at times undocumented, which is the current crisis that Europe and other continents do not face. And therefore, with such a challenge, there is a need of the kind of intervention that are being injected into the system to ensure that the right people move and you manage the movement of people so that everyone should be documented, which is the right thing to do, and take advantage of our tourism, take advantage of so many things that we as Africans can do together. And all of what we are saying should be done with dignity and respect. I think that's what is central.
Well, Professor David, let's see how this actually pans out. But for now, we thank you. We do appreciate you taking time out this morning with us right here on Salam Media. All the best to you, sir.
Most welcome.
Professor David Monyae, Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. And let's see how the simplified visa process for Nigerian visitors to South Africa works out. We're going to go for a break. Next up is Juma Inspirations.